Right, it's that time again. Well, it's not actually that time, it's earlier than usual. Here we go. We're going to have a look at China and then hopefully fit in some other developments and news on religious freedom around the world. So firstly, the source that I'm using is Forbes, and I read here that last month, April of 2021, Radio Free Asia reported that authorities in China are detaining Christians in secretive mobile transformation facilities to make them renounce their faith. According to that report, a member of a Christian house church in the southwestern province of Sichuan said he was held in a facility run by the ruling Chinese Communist Party, the CCP's United Front Work Department, working in tandem with the state security police, and he was held for 10 months after a raid upon his church in 2018. He says that it was a mobile facility that could just set up in basically some basement somewhere. It was staffed by people from several different government departments. The man explained that he was held in a windowless room for nearly 10 months, during which time he was beaten, verbally abused, and mentally tortured by staff, eventually resorting to self-harm by throwing himself against the wall. He added that they use really underhand methods. They threaten, insult, and intimidate. These methods appear to be similar to the treatment described by Uyghurs held in concentration camps in Xinjiang, treatment that Beijing continues to strongly dispute. So while the allegations are yet to be investigated thoroughly, they add to the ever-growing evidence of the deteriorating treatment of religious groups inside China. Recent reports suggest that Uyghurs have been subjected to killings, torture and abuse, rape and sexual violence, forced labor, forced abortions, forced sterilizations, and much more. Other reports suggest that Falun Gong practitioners are subjected to forced organ harvesting. Can you believe this absolute crap? Christians are subject to various methods of discrimination and persecution in China. Christians often complain of the closures of churches, bans on the sales of Bibles online, the removal of crosses, and the arrest of priests and worshippers. Reports also recently suggest that there are plans to, contextualize the Bible to make it more culturally acceptable and for Christian preaching to be adapted to include the core values of socialism. Have you ever heard anything more ridiculous? Well, probably if you watch these videos on persecution that I make. On January 13th, 2021, Open Doors, who are an international NGO advocating on behalf of persecuted Christians, released, if you remember, I told you at the time, their annual World Watch List, which assesses 50 countries where Christians face the most severe types of persecution. According to their assessment, China has entered the top 20 for the first time in a decade due to ongoing and increasing surveillance and censorship of Christians and other religious minorities. You may have heard me speak about the mothers' meeting, basically, that was raided by government authorities in China, literally all women and children. So, as they reported, the policy of sinicizing the church has been implemented nationwide as the CCP limits whatever it perceives as a threat to its rule and ideology. Thousands of churches have been damaged or closed. In some parts of China, children under the age of 18 aren't allowed to attend church, part of the country's efforts to stunt future growth. While China is ranked 17th as a place where Christians are subjected to high levels of persecution, the situation of all religious groups in China is dire and has been deteriorating in recent years. So this month, news outlets reported that Chinese authorities have been removing Bible apps and Christian WeChat public accounts as new highly restrictive administrative measures on religious staff went into effect on Saturday. So reportedly, Bibles in hard copy are no longer available for sale online either. China, what are you doing with your lives? Just, sort it out. Right, so now we're going to look at basically the perilous state of religious freedom worldwide. So China is the world's most active, although not yet the most vicious persecutor of religious believers of any and all descriptions, basically. China is godless. It is atheistic from a state level, of course, because it's communist. So that says it all, really. Okay. The plight of Muslim Uyghurs confined to re-education camps has gained global attention. However, the Chinese Communist Party targets members of every faith, including Christians, Buddhists, and Taoists. Like Islam, Christianity is viewed as a foreign and therefore dangerous import. It's much harder to control people, obviously, who, adhere to a higher power, somebody, that they view to be above the state. So earlier this month, Radio Free Asia reported that the Chinese government is attempting to force believers to renounce their faith. Excuse me one moment while I just find my place again. These people. Okay, so yeah, they're trying to force them to renounce their faith. RFA interviewed a Christian who was detained in a raid on a house church, the same guy that I just reported to you, and his description of treatment matched accounts from former Uyghur and Falun Gong prisoners. This effort at reprogramming is but one aspect of a multifaceted attempt to either eradicate or sinicize, meaning communize, the Christian faith. Many churches have been damaged or closed. Those that remain open have been forced to display pictures of CCP chieftain, basically the Prime Minister, Xi Jinping, display party propaganda and install cameras. Like, if that's not worrying, I don't, Moreover, the Xi regime now bars children from services. In mid-April, so last month, Asian News reported that the government shuttered a Catholic orphanage run by the Sisters of, I'm so sorry for my pronunciation, Zhaoxian in Hebei province. The authorities gave no explanation, but the CCP likely wanted to end contact between the nuns and the children, many of whom were disabled. The action also furthers the campaign to close faith organizations. Unfortunately, Beijing is not alone in warring against religious freedom, because it is a war, make no mistake about it. The Catholic organization Aid to the Church in Need tracks the systematic attack on faith, attacks even, around the world, and recently released its latest assessment that you will have heard me discuss a couple of times now. Religious Freedom in the World, Report 2021. That's the name of the report. And the organization explains that the volume is ACN's principal research project and has evolved considerably over the years, from being a small booklet to becoming a publication of approximately 800 pages produced by a worldwide team. I think they do it every 2 years. So the crime of persecution is global. You only have to look at Nigeria, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Chad, Niger, North Korea, 50 countries indeed. And don't think for a second that the 51st country that doesn't make it onto the list, as it were, is not still at higher levels of persecution, because as we know now, sadly, everybody on that top 50 list, every country, is at very high to extreme levels of persecution, whereas in years gone by, they could have got onto the list with just mid-range efforts, as it were. So it's a global phenomenon. Behind the violent conflicts, whether in Syria, Yemen, Nigeria, the Central African Republic, or Mozambique, to mention only a few, are those in the shadows who, manipulating the deepest convictions of humanity, which religious views certainly are, have instrumentalized religion in the search for scarce power. Okay, so although serious research like that embodied within the Religious Freedom Report is vital to exposing pervasive tactics and attacks on religious believers. The struggle is intensely personal and it is practical also. So Father Emmanuel Yousaf, National Director of Pakistan's National Commission for Justice and Peace, penned the report's foreword to introduce it. He said, "I have worked in rural communities in which Christians were not respected due to their faith. They were banned from shops, restaurants and cafes. In such places, our faithful were not allowed to touch glasses or other eating implements used by the majority community." And that would be Muslims in this case. "As we have supported girls from minority faith backgrounds who are particularly at risk. These are children who, despite the fact that they are only minors, are kidnapped, forced to convert and marry." You'll remember Myra Shabazz, surely. I made a couple of videos on her. She was 14 when she was kidnapped at gunpoint. When a high court ordered her to a women's refuge, the Supreme Court of Pakistan subsequently ordered her back to her abductor / husband. Rapist is what we call them. They also suffer rape and other abuses, which we know about and we pray for them, certainly. So religious freedom explores the complexity of the issue. The study rates as red countries that engage in religious persecution. This group has an outsized impact as it includes 26 countries, which are home to 3.9 billion people, or just over half of the entire world's population, just within these 26 countries. This classification includes, you won't be surprised by now, I don't think so anyway, 12 African countries and 2 countries where investigations of possible genocide are ongoing, namely China and Myanmar, which is in old money, that's Burma. So the People's Republic of China, which is an oxymoron in and of itself because it does not belong to the people of China. The Communist China is the most populous nation and largest by means of sheer numbers persecutors. Its controls are not at the moment as totalitarian as those in North Korea, but to be fair, North Korea is at the top of the list and has been there for almost 2 decades. It's neither as totalitarian as Saudi Arabia or Eritrea. However, Beijing's hostility to faith afflicts far more people. The death of Mao Zedong led to a long but significant relaxation in state control over religion. Unfortunately, in recent years, that liberalization has been reversed, as we see. So the report details how the state presents Western values, Western constitutional democracy and Western-style free media as in conflict with the Chinese Communist Party's values. And of course it does. Anyone who calls them out for being just utter, oh my gosh, it's just outrageous. People who screech for censorship or quietly introduce it in the night, it's not because they are like sterling pillars of the community, ever. Anything that goes against their values. And it states that petitions and letters calling for protection of human rights are the work of Western anti-China forces. The new NGO law, which came into force in January 2017, gives the authorities power to restrict the work of foreign groups in the country and to limit the ability of local groups to receive foreign funding and work with foreign organizations. So foreign NGOs must be sponsored by a Chinese government organization, be registered with the, wait for it, police, and be under the supervision of the Public Security Bureau. Foreigners or members of foreign organizations deemed to be involved in activities aimed at splitting the state, you know, things that could be as radical as putting a poster up, damaging national unity or subverting state power, can be detained, barred from leaving the country, or deported. I know what I prefer. Excuse me. So Xi appears to be determined to become the new Mao, basically. And we all know what an absolute charmer he was, unless you're Diane Abbott and then you've no idea. He killed like hundreds of millions. According to the report, 5 years ago, Xi explained to senior party leaders that religious groups must adhere to the leadership of the Communist Party. Party members must be unyielding Marxist atheists. How dare they tell people like what to actually believe? Who resolutely guard against overseas infiltrations via religious means. This followed a speech by the director of China's State Administration for Religious Affairs. I can't believe they've got the cheek to have a department like with that in the title. Who told a seminar on the Sinicization of Christianity that Chinese Christian theology should be compatible with the country's path of socialism. That is, Xi wants to remake the faith into basically a Sino-Leninist variant. It doesn't want it to have anything to do with the truth or Christianity, and definitely not Christ. Unfortunately, for them and for the people caught doing it, new technologies are expanding the opportunity for oppression, as well as getting, the information out. So the issue of oppression was addressed in a separate chapter that said faith groups perceived as a direct challenge to a jealous atheist system are and will increasingly be watched. The most egregious violation of religious freedom is that perpetrated against the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang state. As part of a Strike Hard campaign against violent terrorism program, approximately 1 million out of a total population of 13 million Turkic Muslims are imprisoned in re-education camps and subject to mass arbitrary detention, torture, and mistreatment. It's just outrageous. So the second most populous nation, which is majority Hindu India, also presents a serious problem that has worsened dramatically. You may have heard me report on Hindu nationalists and their persecutions of Christians, who they do not, converts to Christianity, especially from Hinduism, they do not see them they don't see them as Indian anymore, actually, and because they equate the two together. So it's a different magnitude for sure, but ACN explains, although interreligious tensions have been a major issue in India dating back to the independence movement and the 1947 partition that created Pakistan and the independent nation of India and Pakistan, as it were, the political, social and cultural influence of Hindu nationalist groups, collectively known as Sangh Parivar, or family organization or association, like the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, I hope so, National Volunteer Organization, has grown dramatically since Modi's election. Members of various Sangh Parivar organizations now hold senior positions within the government, the military, and academia. If that's not chilling, I don't know what is. ACN rates as orange nations that practice discrimination, often simply a less virulent form of persecution. This offence afflicts more countries than in the red category, though fewer people overall. So you remember the last red group were 51% of the global population. So within these amber or orange category, 36 countries, which are home to 1.24 billion people, the numbers just cease having any meaning, like when they get this big. Slight improvements are identified in 9 countries, whilst the situation in 20 countries is worsening. And among these problem states is Egypt. You won't be surprised to hear me say, after the slaughter of quite a few Coptic Christians, the one who was in the IS video, especially Nabil, who I reported on. So under a dictatorship worse than the long-lived Mubarak regime, although religious conversion is not prohibited by law, in practice, the government does not recognize conversions from Islam. ACN notes, the law does not recognize the Baha'i faith or its religious laws and bans Baha'i institutions and community activities. Baha'is do not have recourse to civil law even for personal status matters. The same applies to Jehovah's Witnesses, I read here. Nor have Christians prospered despite attempts by the Sisi regime to appeal for their support. In August 2016, the Egyptian parliament adopted a new church construction law to facilitate the construction, renovation, and legal recognition of churches. However, escalating attacks, administrative obstacles, and failures by the state to stem social violence against Christians when they would attempt to build, restore, or just have their churches recognized reveals a huge gap between the law and everyday life. More worrisome, potentially, is the recent spate of assassinations and random killings of Copts, sometimes in the street, just brazenly. Coptic Christians is who I mean when I say, and also against their churches and property. I'm going to end up on this next part. So Cuba is a largely Christian nation in which Christians face pervasive restrictions. Neither law nor practice is friendly toward believers there. The ACN explains that the Cuban Penal Code says that anyone who abuses freedom of worship is guaranteed by the Constitution. As guaranteed by the Constitution, faces prison. Cuban law warns that anyone who belongs to or is affiliated with an association that is not listed in the appropriate registry. I could not live in a communist regime. It's just outrageous. In the appropriate registry can be punished, and I would suggest that means will be punished. Anyone participating in meetings or protests held by this type of association will be sanctioned. Moreover, the Office of Religious Affairs of the Central Committee of the Communist Party administers the different aspects of religious life. What is the point? This is so pathetic. It approves or denies visits by foreigners to religious associations, authorizes the construction, repair, or acquisition of places of worship, grants permits to perform public religious services, etc., etc., oversees the importation of Bible. It's just getting involved everywhere where it's not wanted. The communist government also authorizes itself to regulate and restrict the use of places of worship. So I'm going to end there. There is a further section on nations that are under observation. You can read that within the link that I'm going to post as soon as I stop this stream. What I'd ask you to meditate on potentially, or ponder, if you haven't already noticed, all of the countries that I just discussed are either, actually, no, that's unfair. So Hinduism aside, Islam and communism seem to my mind at least, have very similar structural, other than the absence of God, which I would argue they both have the absence of God, obviously, because I believe in the one true God. But just structurally, and the way, the censorship and the quelling of any uprising and the monitoring of its own citizens, and even within families, honor killings, etc., in the Islamic camp, and then in communist China and in Cuba, for example, you'll have a version of the secret police, or cameras installed in your church, etc. And it's something to consider that only the truth really seems to me to be vilified and railed against in this manner. Things that are obviously absurd, we tend to laugh at them. We let them slide. It's only ever things that are true, in terms of Christianity anyway. I think it's testament to Christ's own words. The truth, the darkness just couldn't understand him. If we're hated, it's because he was hated. And he is hated because he is the truth. And the father of lies certainly doesn't want the truth to be known or accessible in your life or mine. So please do pray for Christians in North Korea and China and Cuba and the entire list, the gamut of countries that I just read through. If any of you are moved to further help other than prayer, please do contact me in the comment section, and I can give you some free, relatively, it takes 3 to 4 minutes to send an email to a persecuted Christian in maybe the Middle East. What have you got to lose, basically? I, for one, really do hope that if or when Christianity, where I am, is persecuted as vociferously as, for example, Nigeria, there'll be a K somewhere screeching into a computer and telling everybody to pray for us. So when one of us suffers, we all suffer. But God is sovereign. He is in control. He has suffered the greatest indignity on our behalf. Nothing we can suffer can come close to what he's already done for us. So there's that to also meditate. Please do pray for Christians globally, but focus your prayers on, maybe a couple of specific regions. All right then. So yeah, I think I got through that pretty decently. Didn't swear or didn't, lose it. Didn't actually have to get my tiny violin out at any point because there was no justification, but I'm sure I'll get to use it again soon. Okay then. Right, I will see you soon for a premiere once I download and upload and edit and do all the high-tech stuff. And yeah, see you soon. Bye-bye.